We are live today in Laguna Beach, California at the Ben Reinberg I Own It studio. Today is a special day for me, and I want to communicate to everyone in life, we are always selling. Whether you're buying or selling or communicating, you are always selling. And I want to explain what that means. Whether you're talking to your kids, a significant other, whether it's employees, whether it's coworkers, you name it, you're always in a position where you have to be part of a sales process or pieces of it. And I felt it was important that we share with you today how the sales process works, having an expert that's been there, done it. He's been doing this for decades. He is an author, a speaker. He has his own academy. He teaches. He is a extremely generous person. And I wanted to bring him on to be able to share and drop this knowledge on all of you because all of us, including me and this gentleman, are always part of a sales process. Jerry Acuff, welcome to the show. It is such a pleasure to have you. I am so grateful. Let's get right into it
Sure.
so people can understand how talented and special you are. Let's just start off with selling. I mean, you talk about how, in people's perception, how do you define selling? What is your definition of selling?
Well, I tell you, I stole my definition, because I don't have, I know because I read a lot, I study a lot, especially, human behavior, et cetera. But, and this was really interesting because my first two sales jobs, I was not very good. I got fired, because I ran out of family and friends and insurance. And then I went to work for Lipton Tea and I was selling tea in West Tennessee. And Ben, I couldn't get out of the car and call on customers because I had such sales reluctance. And so I got a job in coaching football. So because what I want to do is to, coach football. And then I got rejected from graduate school at Northeast Louisiana University. And that's kind of hard to do. At least it was back in the 70s. And so I wound up getting a job in the pharmaceutical business. And honestly, the first 6 years, and I was in it 6 years, then they promoted me. I really didn't know what I was doing. I did exactly what my boss told me. But I do remember that driving down the road when I became a manager, now I got 8 people, I got to teach them how to sell. I remember coming to this conclusion. I know how to do this job, but I don't know how to teach somebody to do this job. So I went and I bought a book by Roger Staubach called Winning Strategies in Selling. It's not a great book, but he has one quote in there from a guy named Charlie Tremendous Jones. And he said this, and this changed my life. He said, chances are you'll be the same person 5 years from today that you are today, with the exception of 2 things: the people you meet and the books you read. And the person who won't read is truly no better off than the person who can't read. Now, I had read 3 books in 10 years. I had read Jaws. I read QB7 by Leon Uris. And I thought, well, hell, if I ever didn't have to move to New Jersey, I better read The Godfather. And since then, I've written 4 bestsellers. I got another one coming out in January. And then I'm writing with another sales guru named Jeremy Miner. And if you don't know him, you do need to know Jeremy, because I've learned so much from him. He's 30 years younger than me. And he had me on his podcast. And he called me afterwards and he said, I've talked to 25 great sales people with big time names. He said, none of these people know sales like you do. And so he and I developed a relationship. Now we're writing a book. But in reading the book, I actually listened to a guy named Fred Herman, and he says the most important thing that you need is to have the right definition of selling. And so the very first chapter in my sales book called Stop Acting Like a Seller, Start Thinking Like a Buyer, which I think I wrote 15, 16 years ago, says this, and all I did was steal Fred Herman's. But Fred Herman said, selling is teaching. In every successful sale, someone learns something that they didn't know before. And it's that new insight, that new learning that causes them to want to do something different. The second thing he said is that selling is finding out what people want and helping them get it. He said, now here's the problem with that concept. Most people don't know what they want, but they think they do. Our job as salespeople is to truly understand their situations and then be able to offer them something, if we have something, that would benefit them. And if you don't have anything, then you need to go someplace else, because if they don't need what we have no right to sell them what we do have. And that was a gigantic learning for me, because it said, holy smokes, all I have to do is to go and teach people, and I'm good at that. Or all I have to do is find out what people want and help them get it. Now, far, far, far too many salespeople never really do understand what the customer wants, because they're in such a hurry to sell something. And one of the things I write in my book is, the less you care about the sale, the more you sell. Now, what do you care about? You care about being good at your job. And so you do kind of sharpen the saw, et cetera. So my definition of selling is exactly what Fred Herman's was. Selling is teaching. Selling is finding out what people would want and helping them get it. And most people don't know what they want, but they think they do. And then, so that's what selling is. And so as long as I can be true to that, I mean, when I started my business 21 years ago, and this is interesting, because I was 51, and I had a 1-year-old, and I had just gotten fired from a job as a VP of sales, where I had taken them from 4 million to 8 million, but I disagreed with the chairman of the board, and he fired me. And I have enough money, Ben, to last me 4 months, and I'm 51 years old. And I don't have any idea what the heck I'm going to do. And a guy calls me that used to work for me, and he asked me if I would do a speech. And I said, David, what do you want me to do a speech for? Well, I got these people in my organization, and they want you. They all want to hold hands and sing songs. They don't want to be accountable. And you're the most motivational speaker I've ever heard, and I want you to come and get these people excited. And I said, David, look, I got to be honest with you. I need the money, but you'd be wasting your money. Because, see, he didn't really want somebody to inspire his people. He wanted his leaders to be good at holding their people accountable, and he'd never thought of that. I said, so let me tell you what you need, David. You need somebody who can come in there who understands change management, which I do, and you need them to work with your leaders for 6 months. Now, if in that 6 months you want me to do a speech, I'll be happy to do it. But you need a consulting project with somebody who can help your folks change to make the change that you want them to make. So he says, can you do that? And I said, well, I probably could. He said, send me a proposal. Now, I don't even have a company. So I walked down the street, lawyer lived 3 doors down, start me an LLC, call it Delta, because that means change. And that was my first client. But my first client I got by telling him I didn't think he needed me. And now, he's been a client of mine for 20 years. Also hired him as a rep, and he wound up being the president of AstraZeneca in China. And now he's a big shot in an American drug company.
I want to circle back on one of the things you said. You said about, spending time and not rushing through on a sale. And it's such an important point, because when you can take someone and build that rapport and build the relationship, which you preach about, which I agree with you, is instead of rushing through it, it becomes more of an efficient process, because you're closing deals, you're closing more deals, and you hit the end goal a little bit faster just by taking the time to care, build that rapport. And that's exactly how I feel where success lies in selling. One of the other things is, you mentioned reading and how powerful knowledge is. And you have to teach, and you have to be an expert, because in order to build rapport, people have to feel comfortable with you, that you're the expert, and you have to know what you're selling and understand it, and the benefits, and why you're doing it, and why the other person needs it. If they don't need it, why are you selling it? Right. And so you have to ask questions and find that out. What do you recommend? You mentioned reading. What are, say, 5 or 8 books you could share with the masses here that you would suggest to, if they couldn't afford to hire you and they wanted to learn selling before they could hire someone like you, or at least get mentored or coach or come to an academy? What are those books that you would recommend?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, if it's about selling, I mean, certainly I think my book, there's 2 books I wrote, but you really only need to read one. It's Stop Acting Like a Seller, Start Thinking Like a Buyer. is a book that I wrote. The last third of that book, Ben, is basically a condensed version of my first book, which is called The Relationship Edge in Business. And my hypothesis there is that when I actually build a business relationship with you, you will listen to me differently than you listen to other salespeople. Now, how do I do that? We teach people, how do you do that? And the other thing that we teach people is the average person that we're talking to as a prospect or potential client, they believe their innate bias is that we're biased. In other words, we're there to sell them whatever we got. And I think the way you build trust is actually to tell people that you're not biased. I mean, if you look at, the business that I spend a lot of time in pharmaceuticals, the number one product in the world, I think, has got a 38 share. Well, heck, you could go into any doctor in America if you had a competitive product and say, look, our product's not for everybody. I mean, the number one product in the world isn't for everybody. And whenever you say that, you sound different than everybody else. Brendan Kane wrote a really good book, and it's a good book. I don't recommend it because I'm about to tell you what I think everything that he said was really brilliant, because a lot of it was over my head. But one of the things he said is that if you want to get somebody's attention, you need to practice pattern interruption that makes them want to learn more. So when I go in to talk to somebody, and whether it's a big client, like a big pharmaceutical company, and I might be talking to 10 people, I'll start by saying, look, I'm going to make the assumption that you really do not want to hire me. Now, that is pattern interruption, because that's not what the average consultant says. And then they'll say, well, why? And I said, because, look, I used to run a company. I don't want to hire any consultant. If I thought we could do it ourselves, I'd do it. So tell me, why did you call me? Well, we can't do it ourselves. And I said, well, tell me what you've done. Well, why do you want to know that? I said, well, the reality is, what if I'm going to do the same thing you're going to do that you did? It didn't work. I mean, then why would you hire me? So then we began this discussion where they realized that I was just trying to find out, what had they done? Did it work? And then I asked them this question. I said, do you have any idea why your customers aren't buying from you? They said, yeah. And they told me what it was. I said, I don't think you're right. And they said, well, do you know what it is? I said, yeah, I'm about 98% sure. He said, well, you going to tell us? I said, not until you pay me. But let me tell you why I'm going to do it that way. Because I'm going to actually go out and find out if my hypothesis is correct. But I will tell you this. If it is correct, I will be able to change, my company will change your business very shortly. Now, at that time, they had an 18 share. They thought they would have 40. So they're $220 million behind forecast.
Okay.
And in 9 months, we had them at 52 market share.
Jerry,
so we just figured out things that they hadn't even thought of. Too many people, I always say selling is a thinking person's game. And Jeremy would tell you, the guy I wrote my book with, and I actually posted this on LinkedIn this past week, is that your voice is one of the most important things you have. And so if you read Chris Voss's book, and this is one I would suggest, Chris Voss wrote Never Split the Difference. And he talks about how important not only your voice is, but inflection and pausing. Far too many salespeople talk too fast. Now, the other book I would read is Weldon Long's book, The Power of Consistency. And his book is basically a modern day version of Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. I would also read Questions That Sell. And I'm going to have to think about Kylie. I'll come to a minute, but this is a book that I actually endorsed, and I wrote it a long time. But you can't read that book and not learn 10 questions that you ought to ask customers, because it's so well written.
So, Jerry, in my business alliance, I'm constantly putting myself in a position with my investors, and I'm an investor myself in many of our deals. Yet to hear you talk about mindset, you describe how people often think like a seller, right? Instead of thinking like a buyer.
Right.
Why do you believe it is that many people don't instinctively put themselves in the buyer's shoes And what are some of the most effective practical tips you have for taking a more empathetic point of view with these folks?
Yeah, it's a good question. A couple of things. I think the reason why, and this is, my view of the world, and I've been in this business 48 years, and I've owned this company for 21 years, and we've done business, I think, with 19 of the top 100 companies in the world. But I think what happens is, and I think Tony Robbins probably said it better than anybody. He said, look, if what you're doing is not working, it means you've been taught wrong. And I think far too many people have been taught that selling is, open the call, ask questions, tell the story, handle objections, etc. It's really not about thinking, like, trying to understand what the customer thinks. My bias is you cannot change what someone thinks unless you know what they think. And far too many salespeople are not taught, how do you have the patience and what kind of strategies can you use to get the customer to actually want to hear what you have to say. And so what happens is that the vast majority of salespeople, in my opinion, they inadvertently and unintentionally create sales resistance the moment they sound like every other salesperson. And so what we teach people is to go in and say to somebody, look, I'd like to do something a little different today. Now, if I say that to you, you are going to ask me, well, what do you want to do? And I'm going to say, well, I really don't, I don't want to sell you anything. What I'd like to do is to try and understand, how do people like you make decisions in categories like this when there's so many things that you have to contemplate? And what I find in that situation, Ben, is that most people, they'll sit back and they'll feel like they're being interviewed. Well, they are being interviewed. But what I'm trying to find out is, what are the things that make you tick? I heard somebody say one time, to sell Jane Brown what Jane Brown buys, you have to see the world through Jane Brown's eyes. And most salespeople are interested in the sale and not in how they can actually help the customer succeed. I mean, I used to run a drug company a long time ago, and we had a product. It was a really good product. And I had a pharmacist, in the East call me and say, we have physicians who are misusing your product, and we can't get them to stop. They were brain surgeons, right? And I said, well, look, I'm the guy who's responsible for P&L for this business. Can I fly over there, and if you can get all these doctors together, I'll ask them to please don't use our product. He said, you would do that? I said, I don't want anybody using our product if it's inappropriate. So I had consulted with our medical department, and they said, no, that's not, our product should not be used in that kind of surgery, et cetera. So I flew over there, got these people together, and I said, look, y'all need to know, I got a degree in English, and I had a hard time getting that. I was on academic probation every semester you could possibly be. So I do not fashion myself as an intellect or certainly a medical person. However, I did consult with our medical group, and their advice was that our product should not be used in the kind of surgeries that folks like you do. And the reason why is because if you do, it'll accelerate the resistance to this product by these pathogens. And that's not what we want at all. So I'm asking you, and I'm going to be the one who's going to take the hit from this financially, just don't use our product. And instantly they quit using our product. But to me, a lot of this is about what is the right thing to do. And to me, the right thing to do is to try and figure out, okay, what is the right thing to do in this situation? And I think the vast majority of people stop 1, 2, 3 questions before they actually really understand what's going on in the mind of the customer.
And to revert back, I mean, one of the things that is really something that I use that you taught me, that I never told you this, is this when for my business, this investment might not be for you.
Yeah.
And that kind of just lowers the barrier. And then you have a discussion, and then you get into, like you said, ask them 4 or 5 questions and find out what they're doing, build a rapport with them, understand what do they want. Do you want to invest in Alliance's fund? Do you want to invest? Do you want to buy this product? Do you want to buy a car? Whatever you're selling, and find out, because why are they here? Why are they in front of you? Okay. Why did they fill out, like a lot of people now, Jerry, are doing online sales? Why did they fill out the landing page? Like, no one really asked that. It's like, why are you in my sphere? Why are you here? And I think that's really important what you touched on.
It's a very simple question too. And I mean, I'll tell you a story. I write about this in my book. I walk into Staples in Flagstaff, Arizona. And at the time, my wife and I had a home in Scottsdale, and we had a home in Flagstaff. So, and we had just bought this house. And so I walk in, I need a printer. And so I walk in, and so they hear this 21-year-old kid from Northern Arizona. Here's what he says to me. Now, I think this guy's a genius. He says, are you looking for anything in particular? Now, he's the only person in my life who's ever said that to me in a retail situation. They all say, can I help you? He said, I said, yeah, I'm looking for the printers. He said, well, let me show you where they are. So he takes me to the printers. He said, okay, there's these 6. He said, so if I were you, I'd look at these. And he starts to walk away. I said, whoa, get back here. I said, do you know anything about these printers? He said, yeah. I said, well, which one would you buy? Then he asked me this question. Well, what are you going to use it for? I don't know. Now, this is 15 years ago, right? He said, well, look, these 3 over here are really good at almost anything, including photos. These 3 over here can't do photos, but they're really good printers. So if you're not going to use photos, I would make a decision between these 3. And I said, well, which one would you buy? He said, well, I'd buy the one in the middle. And he said, and I said, well, why would you do that? He said, well, candidly, they're all really good, but this one is easier to set up. And I get the sense that you're not very good at setting this stuff up. So you probably need something easier. And I said, boy, you're absolutely right. Now, here's his next question, Ben. He says, is your house 1 story or 2? Now, you think this is a question that I'm expecting from a Staples floor salesman? And I said, it's 2 stories. Why do you ask? He said, do you think you'd ever want to be upstairs and print downstairs? And I said, yeah. He said, do you have a router? I didn't even know what a router was. So my point is, he sold me a printer, a router, a whole bunch of cables, and all of this because I walked in there thinking I wanted a printer. What I really wanted was the capability to be able to print anywhere in my house. And he was smart enough to understand that. Otherwise, I'd bought that thing and then tried to print it from upstairs to downstairs, and I'd have been madder than a hornet.
And guess what? You're going to go back to that store
all the time. I'd like to go back and hire the guy.
Yeah. So, and the lesson is you'll spend more money there than you originally, than the outset. Yeah. And that's a good lesson. And it really has, I mean, at the end of the day, it's an integrity component. Yes. If you live your life with integrity and you're a teacher and you educate, that's why what you teach has success.
Yeah.
And it creates a well-rounded process too. Yeah. Let's talk about, so nearly 1 in 8 jobs, Jerry, in America are sales jobs. It's right. Like 10 million plus, I think is the stat. And as a sales leader and a mentor and a coach, and I'm sure you've seen the gamut in your career, what are the internal qualities you believe that you had to be a superstar salesman that you could share with people? And when you're doing consulting work, okay, what are some of the top issues you see that hold people back from reaching their potential to become successful in sales?
Yeah, those are 2 big questions. I think what's made me successful is I have a gigantic fear of failure. And so, I've always, and I have had significant failures in my life. And I've overcome them, and I've become successful and, probably what some people would call quite wealthy. And, I'm not, I ain't Warren Buffett, but I mean, we're not going to have any crowdfunding for Jerry and his family. But I was always scared that I was going to fail. And so I always tried to work harder. I tried to learn more than other people did. I think the other thing too, Ben, and I can't emphasize this enough. I think it's the people who've coached me. There's a really interesting book, and if you get a chance, in fact, you don't need to buy the book. If you give me your email, I'll actually send you I'll just send you a picture of this one page, because Maltz used to talk about, the inner self. A guy named Willingham took that to another extreme, and he talked about your 3 dimensions of human performance. One is intellectual, one's emotional, and the third one is what he calls the creative unconscious, which is your self-image. And I learned from that if you have the right mentors, if you have the right people that you lean on to learn from, you can become anything. Now, when I was 37 years old, my life's dream was to be a regional manager for a drug company. Now, a regional manager for a drug company makes $1.50, probably makes another 50 bonus. And that's what I wanted to be. And that's all I thought I had I also thought all the talent I thought I had. And so one of my mentors was a guy named Don Cutcliffe. And he and I competed for a regional manager job. He was 10 years older than me. And he gets a job and I don't. And now he's my boss. So he comes to Birmingham, where I lived at the time. He lived in Tampa, still does. And he came to me and he said this to me, and he changed my life in every conceivable way in 2 minutes. He said this to me. He said, Jerry, I came to tell you tonight two things. One, you should have got this job, not me. You're far more qualified to do it than I am, but they gave it to me and they didn't give it to you, and I'm not giving it back. And then he said this to me, Ben. He said, but I have to tell you, Jerry, this job's not big enough for you. You need to be running our company. Now, I have to tell you, Ben, I'm 37 years old. I had been very successful. The thought of me running a lemonade stand was not in my mindset. But see, what he did, he changed my view of me. And what great mentors do, and I've had so many of them. In fact, every year on Boss's Day, I write it's now 32 people's names who've changed my life. And so much of it is not only what I've read and not only what my mindset is, which is failure is not an option. I will find a way to succeed. But it's also these people who made me stretch and see that I had more in my tank. And that's why when I sign a book, I'll always say, always be incredible. There's greatness in you. And so few people believe that they have greatness in them because they're surrounding themselves with the wrong people.
It's a great point. Let's circle back and talk about fear. You talked about having a challenging childhood.
Yes.
Right? Okay. And the fear of not being like your parents really was your foundation to drive you to who you are today. Do you still have this same fear today, or has it dissipated? And what motivates you now to keep working today based on what you've achieved?
Well, I'm a kind of person who's not very good at sitting around. My hobby is mentoring college basketball coaches, and I mentored probably two of the best top 20 in the country, and I've been with both of them for over 14 years. And I like helping them with leadership issues, et cetera. But no, what keeps me working is, I have not yet achieved what I want to financially for my family. I'm not far from it, but I'm not going to quit until I get where, what I can show you what's in my pocket, which is my goals. Mm-hmm. And when I get there, then I'll slow down. But yeah, the fear, I don't have as much of a fear of failure. I have it episodically, like I had brain surgery this year. I mean, and I don't recommend that as a hobby for anybody. So it was 3 months basically that I couldn't work. And so in my own mind, I haven't achieved enough this year. But our company is doing really good, and I'm really proud of our folks. But no, I don't have the same kind of fear I used to, because I've had lots of success over the last probably 20, 21 or 22 years. But what I am driven by is helping other people succeed. I'm a huge believer in helping other people get jobs, especially people that I believe in, and I don't mind putting my name, with them. And I'm a big believer that anybody who asks me for help, I give it to them.
Let's talk about beliefs. Let's talk about beliefs, because that's so important. And we talk about self-awareness, which is so important, especially when you're selling or living your life. What are the 3 important sales beliefs? I know you teach this a lot. I think it's extremely valuable. Explain to everyone the 3 sales beliefs that create success.
Well, I think you have to have the right definition of selling. Because if you have the right definition of selling, then the next thing that falls into place is intent. What is your intent?
So if you don't have the right selling definition, it can create failure. It creates failure.
Well, if you don't have it, it's not going to create excellence. Let's just say that. There's an awful lot of people who can bully themselves into some degree of success. The question is, could they be dramatically more successful if they actually knew how to build valuable business relationships, if they knew how to do a lot better job of asking questions that help the customer come to their own conclusion. See, great salespeople, and Jeremy and I'll tell you this in our newest book, great salespeople get the customer to come to their own conclusion about what they need. Same thing this kid did for me at Staples. Well, I don't even know what a damn router is. But he taught me that I needed a router, I needed these cables. And if without him, I go home unhappy. And I think the third thing that I teach people, especially in our business, but I think it's probably true in almost any business. If you believe that selling is an occupation, I think you're making a mistake. Because what I would say to you is that it's an opportunity. And I'd say even more than that, it's a responsibility for you to help change other people's lives. And I can tell you, my father had Alzheimer's, and my brother and I went to see him the last time I saw him, and he told me, he said, "Hey, Dad," and I'm named after my dad, right? And my brothers and sisters call me FHB, which stands for Fairhead Boy. So we go see my old man. This is in 2010. And on the way up there, my brother says, "Now, Dad has no cognition, none, zero." So we get there, and he has no cognition. So, but I always look at the chart to see what he's on, and he's on a product called Exelon Patch. And that's a Novartis product, right? And it's for cognition. So the question I'm asking myself, because there's nobody else to talk to, is why is he on this? He has no cognition. So we got ready to leave. He's lost 60 pounds. He's down to 120. And as we're getting ready to leave, I bend down and kiss him. I say, "Dad, love you." And as I walk to the door, he sits up in the bed and he says, "Jerry." And he startled me because that was the most first cogent thing he said. And I turned around and I said, "What, Dad?" He said, "I love you, son." Now, I tell people, I tell this story because when I walked out that door, I realized that I had a life-changing moment because a salesman did their job. It's just that simple. And that's the day that I actually realized that if you're really good at selling, you're impacting an awful lot of people's lives. You don't know who they are. You might know one person, but you don't know all the people that you're sending to college or the people that they're teaching the stuff that you're teaching them. You are changing people's lives. And when you understand that this is an opportunity for us to have a magnificent impact on, I get all kinds of letters from people thanking me for the stuff that we do. And I don't think that we're not splitting the atom here. But what we are doing is getting people to take a hard look at how do you actually conduct yourselves when you're in a selling situation. And if you do it with the right intent, the right definition, and the right integrity, you'll be changing a lot of people's lives, and not the least of which will be your own.
And just to add to that, which I think is so important, is that if you can help solve a problem or a challenge and someone needs what you have, and you have the right product, you have a moral and ethical obligation to sell it to them.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
how I look at it.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes to your point of helping people and serving them and benefiting them and having integrity. In my head, okay, my most memorable sales coaching moment is when Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, he's out there in the public. He has his exercise of "sell me this pen," right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious, do you have a strong point of view on the kinds of coaching tactics that are most effective and those that sound good but don't really translate to desired results?
Yeah, that pen thing is interesting because Fred Herman, the guy who gave me the thing about selling his teaching to find out what people want, he was actually on the Mike Douglas show, and then most people don't know who Mike Douglas is.
Sure.
Mike Douglas had this TV show in Philadelphia, and so Douglas says, "Okay, you're the greatest salesman in the world. Sell me this pen." And here's how he sold the pen. Oh, he said, "Sell me this ashtray." And so Fred says, "Well, Mike, this is a pretty nice looking ashtray here, isn't it?" And he said, "So if you had this thing, what would you do with it?" And so Mike said, "Well, we have people who smoke around here." And he said, "It is decorative, so you could use it as a decoration, or you could use it to keep people from smoking." He said, "Well, what do you think you'd give for it?" He said, I think I'd pay $10 for it." He said, "I'll let you have it for that." That was it. And so his whole point was, guide me to the decision that you wish me to make if it's right, and I'll do the right thing. And so I just really believe that they got to want it. And the most, to me, that some of the most important things that we do is tell people that what you're asking us for is not what you need. And, I'll tell you what you need. Now you can make your own decision. But I have clients. I had one call me the other day. We need you here for 3 hours. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to speak for 30, and then I want to do workshops so your people can actually practice this stuff. Just listen to me. It's going to change 4% of people that you got there. You got 100 people there. I'm going to change 4. I wouldn't pay me diddly to change 4 people. But if you give me the opportunity to bring one of my other people who's just as good as I am, and we get the chance to spend 3 hours with them, after we give them the basics, then we're going to change a lot of people's lives. We just did a product. We're working on a product now that's not been doing very good. We hadn't even given them their playbook yet. And before we gave them their playbook, their sales went up 43% from the second quarter to third quarter, because we taught them the basics of how can you be great at selling. Okay. The biggest mistake I think most salespeople make is they don't understand what a valuable business relationship is. That's one. 2, they're not very good at what I would call leveraging relationships, right? And so they don't know what words to say if they want to meet somebody. They don't know what words to say if they know somebody and they want to find out, could that person refer? We teach them those things. And then I think the other thing is, they go there with the mindset that they have to sell, and they're getting this pressure from their bosses. You got to sell, when in reality, it's a lot easier to sell. I did a thing the other day for a company that was great. And this guy who, there's this new product, and it's really a phenomenal product. It's a medical device. I mean, it's unbelievable. If this thing's successful, it'll change millions of people's lives, because it has an impact on the size of your infarct if you have a heart attack. And so the guy who's leading there's only 10 people in the room, right? And the guy who hired me to come, a friend of mine, he tells me, he said, now I got one guy who's got 85% of all of our business. 85%. And I said, well, I want to interview him. So I interviewed him, nicest guy you'd ever meet. And then when I gave him the definition of selling, he said, well, define selling. I said, selling is teaching. And the moment I said that, Ben, he said, oh my God, I now realize why I'm so successful at selling. I said, well, okay, say more about that, Abe. He said, I was a teacher for so many years. All I did was translate what a great teacher does to what a great salesman does. That's why all these people are buying. And so I think so much of it is up here. You got to get the right idea, that you're not being pushy. See, I always think, and like closing is interesting. I teach people, how can you ask for a commitment where they won't say no? And I actually created this based on how I used to ask girls out in high school.
Okay, so what's the secret sauce then, Jerry?
Well, I wouldn't ask them out until somebody had told me they'd go. And so I figured, how do you do that in selling? So you basically see, do you have alignment? If you do, then you say, okay, I get the sense that you're now ready to begin to think about what might be the next step. Now, you're only going to get 2 answers to that. You're going to get, yeah, we're ready. And then you can go right on and ask them for whatever you want. Or they're going to say, well, I'm still concerned about X. Well, still concerned about X is fundamentally no, but at least it tells me what their hesitation is. So, but I created that because I felt that closing, the way people taught it, is inconsistent with my being. It's inconsistent with who I am. So I wanted to create something that was consistent for me, that would work for me, because I'm not a pushy salesperson.
Understood. You talk about 10 key competencies you and your team must have to be a strong sales coaching, right? Do you encounter, right? Well, yeah. do you encounter many other coaches that don't have the knowledge to be teaching? What experiences and know-how tend to be the areas as inspiring sales coaches lack?
Well, we have our own coaching program. We call it Coaching Catalyst, because what we've learned is that coaching, selling is a completely different skill set than just coaching, period. So if I've got to coach you on how the product works, or how the investment works and all that, That's a completely different thing than I got to teach you on how do you actually engage customers? How do you actually get customers to want to listen? So the biggest problem we find with managers is that they're most of them are not prepared to be managers. We do a survey about every 2 or 3 years. One of the things that we find is that only 14 or 15% of reps go to the manager for advice about how to sell somebody who's tough. That means 85% of the time they're going to one of their colleagues. Now that's fine if one of your colleagues is phenomenal, but if they suck canal water, they're getting bad advice. So part of it is we always say, look, you can't teach or coach what you don't know. You can't teach or coach, which that's not a very complex thing. So to me, you have to, number one, you have to know the stuff. Number two, you have to be authentic and put yourself out there. When I was a first line manager, I made every other call. Now, I didn't make every other call because I was that good, because I will tell you, I had 11 salespeople. If I had to force rank myself into that group, I'd be number 8 because I hired people who were phenomenally successful. But what I wanted them to see was that failure is okay. Lousy calls are okay. I think the other thing, and this is one of the things I tell all my coaches, I actually spoke to the athletic department at my college on Monday before I left. And I told them, I said, look, if you want these people to run through a wall for you, if you want these people to do whatever you'd ask them, you have to love them. Now, I don't mean date them. I mean, you got to love them. And you got to love them for what they are, not for what you wish they were. Your job is, if they're not what you want them to be, it's your job to change them. It's your job to build a relationship with them where they understand that every single thing I do for you as your coach, I do because I love you. I want you, and I tell everybody I hire, I say, I want you to understand this. I want you to be successful in this job. I want you to be successful in our company. I want you to be successful in life. And everything I do will be driven towards those things. And if you leave me at some point in time, and many of them do because they get a better opportunity, and I'm always a cheerleader. If you get a better opportunity, I want you to go. Now, what I've also found, Ben, is that I would say 70% of the people who have left me within a year have hired us. So I actually had a guy from one of my best friends say, I finally figured out your method of success. He said, you bring in these people that have all this experience and you let them work for you for a year and then they come and hire you. And I said, well, but they now know what the inner workings of the thing looks like. But I think you have to be as good a salesman as the best salesman in your group. You have to share. You have to be compassionate. My first boss taught me you have to be family oriented. You have to listen to your employees. We had a call yesterday with our team. We raised everybody's salary because inflation.
Right.
So, I had a conversation with the president of the company, who I hired 11 and a half years ago. And he said, hey, I think we got to raise everybody's salary. And I said, okay. So I got up at 4:00 in the next morning and I wrote down how much I thought everybody should get. All of them were more than 10%. And I gave it to him. He said, well, I'm going to change a couple of these. I said, change whatever you want. But I said, I think your idea is terrific. But, we do things in a small company you can't do in a big company. We don't have dental benefits, right? So I found out, okay, we don't have dental benefits, but we got people who need braces. So I just said, we got dental benefit now, and just put it on your expense report.
Yeah.
Instead of $1,500 1 year, put it on there for 2 years.
Let me
when you
ask
do
you
that,
something.
you build a culture. Now, the last thing I would say to you, which is probably the most important thing, is that when I became a manager, and I was a very successful manager for 8 years, I had the number one district 7 out of 8 years out of 70. The first thing I did, and I don't know why I did this, Ben, but it turned out to be genius. I said, look, we're going to begin every meeting. We back then we met 4 times a year. Every meeting we're going to begin the same way. I'm going to ask every single person in this room, what are you doing to develop yourself as a human being? And I expect you to have an answer. Doesn't have to be about work. You can want to learn how to play a piano. You can want to learn how to be a better Girl Scout leader. You can learn how to be a deacon in your church. I don't care, but I want you learning something. And so it took me about 9 months before everybody was genuine, right? Half of them, got on board fairly quickly, and the other half, they came kicking and screaming. But what I found was when you create a learning environment as a part of your culture, People will self-manage. They will share far more with each other than anybody ever would. And they'll be excited about working because there is an excitement to learning. And so, I mean, that's what we try and do now in our company. Somebody asked me this week, hey, can I go listen to Chris Voss for $4,000 for 4 days in Nashville? I said, absolutely. And then come back and tell us what you learned. Got a woman who works for us who's one of the most brilliant people we've ever had. She's taught us all about emotional intelligence because she's been to two or three seminars, and now we're selling it. So I think you have to create a learning environment. I think you have to have courageous conversations. You have to have the guts to tell somebody they are not living up to their potential. One of the biggest mistakes that I think managers make is that they talk about people's individual, competency shortcomings. Don't do that. Just tell them, here's what bothers me. Okay, your potential's here, and your potential, I mean, your performance is here, your potential's here. I need you to tell me, why is there this gap? And I've had that conversation with 500 people. You know how many people have ever argued with me about their potential? Zero.
And let me add to that, because this is really important. What I find that people that, like you say, aren't living to the potential is two things: commitment, too many distractions going on in the day,
Yeah.
they're not committed, and number two is they're not spending the time, like you said, to learn and educate themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're in a complicated business, say like our business, commercial real estate,
Yeah.
and you're in a sales position and you have too many distractions going on during the day, or you're not committed to the process, and
Right.
you're not willing to expand and learn because, let's say, it's new to you, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing the company a disservice. And so I think it's a great point. Let's switch gears a little bit. My impression of sales incentives, okay, you see a lot of them out there, are something that many companies struggle with. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that we thought about, now was the fact that, our people are very well compensated because we have to hire people who have lots of experience and who, in the mind of the customer and in our mind, could actually be a consultant in a reasonably short period of time because of their experience. But I think if your compensation, if they know what it is going in, if they know what their opportunity is, if they know what they have to do it, it's probably not a problem. But I think, when I was a manager in the pharmaceutical business, I would have 10 salespeople, and all 10 of mine would be in the top 50. And I got the same bonus as the guy who was last. Now, what I learned, my boss taught me a long time ago, my very first boss, because I got hired in November, and the guy that got hired in December, he inherited the best territory in the country. I inherited the worst. And so he was making more money than I was salary-wise. He was making more money in bonus. And I'll never forget, Jim said to me, I told him one time, it really bothered me that, this other guy's doing better than I am financially. And I'll never forget what Jim said to me, because it was turning point in my career. He said, Jerry, look, he's always going to make more money than you until you get promoted. He said, but you need to understand this. Your rewards in this company are not going to come in this job. And if you can't live with that, then you need to go someplace else. And so, I thought long and hard about it, but now I wound up running the company, and that guy's still in the territory. And so, but my reverence for my boss, because he had the guts to tell me the truth, because he was phenomenal. In fact, he's 84. He just wrote an ebook, and because I think he's thinking I'm his most famous, previous employee. I actually wrote the foreword to it because it's a really good book. But my point is, people want you just to be honest with them, and just be honest. Don't try and BS them. Don't try and take them down some rosy road. You just be honest with them, and people will take that. But I think, you have to create an environment when you're in wherever you work, and where people want to work for you badly.
Let's talk about that, because that's a real important point you brought up. why is it so hard to land on the perfect formula? And are there particular approaches that you typically recommend or suggest?
Well, I think the big thing that we do, and I think we can do that a lot of companies can't do, is we actually can listen to our employees and we can make changes based on what they said. I mean, you know, we hired this guy to do business development. Now he hadn't sold a thing, right? And he complained about the fact that he can't get in a 401k for 18 months. So whenever my employees bring something like that to us, I'll always, talk to somebody that actually can do something about it. And so I called our financial guy and I said, "Who's the idiot that created this policy?" He said, "Well, that idiot would be you." And I said, "Well, can we change it?" He said, "Yeah, you can change it." So we changed it to January the 1st. Then he's the guy who brought forth the dental benefit. So I had my admin check out the dental benefit. It's for 1 year, $1,500. I said, "We're going to have a dental benefit. It's not going to be, it's not going to be anything but just put it on your expense report, but you can do $1,500 for 2 years." Then I had somebody come to me and said that because we had changed from United Healthcare to Blue Cross Blue Shield, that they had to pay the first $500 for physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I make a call immediately and find out that, I could add coverage for that for $10,000. So I did. And so we respond to their concerns. We listen to their concerns, but we also told them yesterday, we're not always going to be able to do all the things that you want us to do. But I'll tell you this, number one, we want every single one of you to stay here for a very long time. And we're doing everything we can to grow this company so that you have more opportunity and more stability. And we want this to be a really, really fun place to work. And I would say a lot of this is about leadership. And I would say our president, Matt Murphy, is probably as good at this as anybody I've ever met. And we got a VP of operations, and she's a sidekick, and they are terrific at keeping me in the loop about what does it take to keep these people really excited about working at Delta Point. I mean, one of our last employees actually took a $30,000 pay cut to come to work.
That's
She
fantastic.
said, "I'd rather work there than I would someplace else where I made more money because the culture's different."
Let's talk about so pricing and negotiating with Backbone is an area where I've observed that there's sometimes a conflict interest between sales and the company, especially for B2B businesses.
Right.
Do you agree with that? And what organization structures do you typically recommend to remedy this?
I don't, I can only speak for, for our company. I mean, the reality is, number one, we rarely respond to an RFP, if ever. And because all they're asking for is how much can we beat you up on price? Most of our clients ask us to sign a master service agreement, and they'll want to know, how many hours is this going to take, et cetera. And all we do is we tell them exactly what's going to happen. Now, if they want to beat us up, and sometimes they do, then, we already have calculated. Now, what we usually do is we put one or two things in the proposal that if they had to take them out, they wouldn't change the likelihood that they would be successful, but it might satisfy the people that are actually making the purchasing decision. But I think you have to have some integrity. I mean, we're actually in discussion with ourselves about how, we should actually raise some of our prices because we haven't done much in terms of price, raising for a very long time. It doesn't bother me to lose business. I mean, I'll tell you, I had one of the very first clients I had, I forget, first was about $120,000. And the guy said, "Look, we're going to sign your proposal, but you're going to have to take a haircut." So I said, "Well, let me ask you this question." I said, "Can I ask you some questions about that?" I said, "How many people you want me to train?" So he told me. I said, "So that's the same number that's in the statement of work?" "Yeah." And I said, "And do you want me to also then personally go out and train all of your districts?" "Yeah, I want you to do that." "And you want me to give you people all these books?" "Yes." And I said, "Well, I don't need the weekend to actually give you a new price." "You don't?" "No, that's good." I said, "It's the same thing as it was before you and I started this conversation." I said, "Let me make this really clear to you. Had I reduced this price, you know what you would have thought of me? you would have thought that I was stealing from you. And I ain't going to steal from you. I'm going to tell you what it costs. And if you want it, good. If you don't want it, I'll go someplace else.
That's great. Great advice. Let me ask you, so 2 suggestions you had around realizing your goals are ones I particularly like. Okay. Number 1 is write it down. I am a big proponent of that. There is there's been studies on it, how important it is. I've been carrying a yellow legal pad of paper since I was a little kid on my hip, and I recommend everyone do it. And I'm telling you, it creates success. You could call me crazy, but it works.
It's not
and
crazy.
Number 2 is don't let someone else or yourself talk you out of it.
No.
Did you learn this lesson the hard way when you were younger?
No, I really didn't, because my grandfather was 6'7". He was a professional basketball player. He loved sports. He was very, and he was a major figure in my life because my parents were so dysfunctional. But they were always very, very, excited about my brother and I's athletic success. No, but what I do know is that my wife, for example, is one of the most talented people I've ever met. And we've been together for 28 years. Her mom tried to talk her out of her own success because in her mother's paradigm, Mary Ann could not be, what she was aspiring to be. And the reality is she's a brilliant entrepreneur. She runs her own business, and people absolutely adore her. And so I just learned from a lot of other people that people will try and talk you out of success. But what their point of view is that I couldn't do this, so I don't think you can either. Right. So I always tell people, look, there's greatness in you. Everybody has greatness in them. I don't think the Lord put anybody on the Lord, Muhammad, or whatever you want to believe in. Whoever is the great creator put us here for greatness. And I think they put us here for this. And I do believe that one of the things that the creator did for us was to make us creative creatures. We are here to create. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm here to create, I don't want to create mediocrity. I want to create excellence. And I want to do everything I can to be as excellent as I can be. And I realize that too many people would say, you can't do that. You can't do that. And by the way, the first person is you. I mean, I'll never forget the first time I said to myself, I think I'm going to make $1 million next year. Now, the most I'd ever made in my life was 461. And I'm having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he asked me how much I made. I told him. He said, is that all? I said, Ian, what are you talking about? And he said, man, the value that you are bringing to companies, you should be making $1 million every year. And I remember leaving, his office in Parsippany, New Jersey. And I remember saying this to myself, I'm going to make $1 million next year. And then the next question I asked myself, Ben, was, how am I going to do it? And you see, that's where people get stuck. They think that because they don't have the answer to it, that it can't be done. And then they may talk to somebody else who has the same mindset that they couldn't do it, and they'll say you can't do it. And so people will give up. I decided I wasn't going to give up. I knew enough about psychocybernetics and the reticular activation system and visualization and writing down your goals and looking at your goals every single week. Mine are in my pocket right now that I don't go anywhere without them. I knew enough of that. If I did that and if I visualized that it would come true. And lo and behold, a month later, Mary Ann says to me, because at the time our business was she and I, she says, you need to hire somebody. And I said, well, I don't even know who to hire. She said, hire Joan Altimos. Well, who the hell's Joan Altimos? Well, she was one of Mary Ann's friends who had just retired, but she was looking for some part-time work. And I hired Joan, one of the best hires I ever made in my life. And Joan enabled me to double my capacity. And that's what led me to such success. But all of that was not a coincidence. Wayne Dyer used to say we must manage the coincidences in our life, and there are none. And so it's not a coincidence. But I do believe that there's an awful lot of people. My father came to see me in our home in Scottsdale, which was 5,100 square feet, picked up by somebody driving a limousine and all this stuff. And he gets home and he calls my brother and he tells him, hey, I want to talk to you about your big brother. Jude said, why, Dad? We just got there. I mean, he's doing really good. So so my brother goes over and here's my father's question. Now, my father quit school in 10th grade, right? bankrupt 3 times. He asked my brother, he said, you think your brother's doing something illegal? Jude said, what are you talking about? He said, well, he's got that big old mafia looking woman driving him around. He's got that, that big expensive house there, and he's really doing well. He said, you sure he's not doing something illegal? No. See, his mindset was, I couldn't succeed unless I had done something illegal.
Well, let's frame that, because there's 2 things you said I think are really important that we discuss. Write it down. Write down what you want to achieve. Like I always ask, what do you want? Right?
Yeah.
Well, answer that question, write it down. When you can write it down, you can achieve it and look at it frequently. The second thing that I thought was very well said that is important is surround yourself with like-minded people that are going to support you and not tear you down. And I am a big proponent of that. I've been living my life that when I have someone that, uses what I call, Jerry, contractions, can't, shouldn't, wouldn't, I can't stand them because I can't get my mind around. I don't believe in the word can't.
Yeah.
I think if you want to achieve something, you can. I want everyone to hear that out there, that you can achieve whatever you want. If you're persistent, surround yourself with the right people, put yourself in the right rooms. And it's extremely important. Your book, The Relationship Edge, has been a top seller for quite some time. And it's filled with very useful, practical advice on sales. I'm curious, do you know exactly what you wanted to share before you're writing it?
Well, yeah, I did, because I had been to Pfizer, and the guy at Pfizer, a group vice president, asked me, how do we get more time with customers? And so as I began to think about that, I realized that time is a function of the kind of relationship that you and I have. So if you and I have a great relationship, I mean, you want me to come out there, I'll come out there. If you want to talk for an hour, I'll talk for an hour. I mean, go do whatever you want. So I bought 6 books that all were on how do you build business relationship, how do you build relationships. And I came to the conclusion that none of them told you how to do it. They all told you what to do. And so I read them again, and I said, I'm just going to create a process by which people can understand how do you build a valuable relationship with somebody, that you don't know. I mean, one of my favorite relationships in the world is Herb Sendek. And Herb is actually a basketball coach at Santa Clara University. I think he's the 4th youngest coach in the history of college basketball with 400 victories. I didn't know Herb when I moved and I'm nobody, compared to Herb. But I wanted to meet him because I love college basketball. I want to be able to see a team. So I asked everybody I knew this question. How well do you know Herb Sendek, if at all? I asked 10 people. The 10th person said, I know him really well. Second question, how comfortable would you be introducing me? I don't say, would you introduce me? How comfortable would you be introducing me? And he said, yeah, you want to have breakfast with him next week? And so I go see Herb. And now I know he's going to ask me, what do I want? So I also have to be prepared for that, right? Now, I was also mentoring a coach then at the time, a guy was coaching at VMI who was leading the nation in scoring for like 10 years in a row. So we started by talking about Duger Balkin. And so at the end, he said, so what do you want from me? And I said, honestly, coach, I don't really want anything. I got enough money. I can buy my own tickets. I said, I think your T-shirts are ugly, so I don't want one of them. I said, but let me ask you this question. I said, yes, how many players in that locker room? 15. I said, of those 15 players, how many of those players are going to be able to make their living without ever getting a job, and they can make the basketball their entire life? He said, not a one of them. I said, well, let me tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to spend an hour with them whenever you want me to, and I'm going to teach them 2 things. I'm going to teach them how to set and achieve stretch goals. I mean, how do they achieve extraordinary things, which is exactly, Ben, what you and I were just talking about. How do you do that, right? You just laid it out. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to teach them how do you build a network of people in college, of people that, because in college, when you're a great athlete, you're a celebrity. The best time for you to leave your mom and dad sitting over there while you go meet some big booster is today, because you can see mommy when you want to, but you can't meet a booster who can get you a job, in the old day. I had that same conversation. I went to football practice Saturday. Last Saturday, one football player came up to me and said, Mr. Acuff, I really do. I really do appreciate all you do. He's a starting tight end. He said, but I want to get into orthopedic sales. And he said, would you help me do that? I said, I'd be glad to help you do that. And I said, I'll give you my virtual training for free. And I said, you can tell people I'm your mentor, and some people will think that's interesting. But my point is, I wrote the book because I wanted people to understand. And one of the things, I think one of the most things that I haven't said that I think is most important is don't make decisions for other people. I cannot tell you the number of people who tell me, I was going to call you, but I know how busy you are. And so, first place, you don't have a clue how busy I am. But if you want to talk to me, call me, because I will either be a jerk, which case I think you would probably want to know that, or I will help you. One of the two. So I think you'd want to know that. But don't make a decision that because I have what you might think celebrity status, that's a reason to not contact me. And so I say, if you want to meet somebody, go meet them. Now, maybe you can't meet them, but you ought to understand what can you do for them that would make that interaction valuable. Now, the very next day, Herb asked me to go talk to his team. And then I told him, I said, by the way, before you leave, if you believe that recruiting is selling, I'll teach your coaches how to recruit. Can you do that next week? Now, if you go on my jerryacuff.com website, you can see a 1 minute and 8 second video of Herb talking about me being the greatest thing since
I've seen it. No, it's a great testimonial on your website.
But I didn't know.
When you were writing this book, okay.
Yeah.
Did you have any revelations or insights saying, oh my God, I'm not doing that. I got to start implementing this in my approach. Did that come about?
Yeah, about 90% of it.
Okay.
I mean, that's one of the good things about writing a book. I mean, the book.
Oh, by the way, it goes back to writing things down, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
We just learned something here, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And I think, doing the book with Jeremy knows more about how to use your voice and tonality and inflection than any. I actually posted this on LinkedIn this week, and Jeremy is a wonderful person, and I loved him and he's got to be 30 years younger than me. But he's a wonderful guy, but he's wicked smart, and he loves to share what he does. So when I try and learn from anybody, my old boss used to say, when you're green, you're growing. When you're ripe, you're rotting. And so I don't want to rot. I want to keep growing. I want to keep growing, and so I keep reading books and watching podcasts. And you don't have to read books anymore like I did, because you can get book summaries and all that stuff. Podcasts, I think, also are probably just as important.
I'm an introvert like you, okay, and we're in roles where we shouldn't be introverts. Yeah. We can't, to make money, right? And feed our family and our employees, etc. How does an introvert? Okay. If you were coaching me, okay, how does an introvert overcome this to become a fantastic salesperson? What would you tell me?
Well, what I would tell you is that there's actually what I think is an introvert's advantage, because introverts are by nature listeners, and they don't really care about themselves as much as someone who's an extrovert. The extrovert wants to, put the focus on the things that are important to them, and they're not very good listeners, and they're not very good relationship builders by and large. Now, there are exceptions to all of those things. But if you read, there's a very good book called The Introverts Advantage. And, I've talked a lot about, I like hiring introverts, because introverts are people who are great at listening. They'll ask better questions. They'll make people feel heard. They won't be focused so much on them. They'll be focused on the other person. And I think they make phenomenal salespeople. Their problem is their own mindset that says, I can't. Their mindset is that introverts can't be successful. You and I, and you're probably like me, probably closer to an ambivert than an introvert. So that you have some extroverted qualities, but they're muted just like mine are. But the reality is our success is driven by the fact that we're really good at listening and thinking about things the way introverts naturally think about it. But that when the introvert has the mindset that you can't be successful in sales if you're an introvert, then guess what? Your prophecy will become self-fulfilling.
Well, that's an interesting point you just brought up because you talked about introverts are great at the relationship process.
Yeah,
And let's talk. So, the relationship process you teach is what you think, what you ask, what you do. And
right.
I love the first thing because you really have to be aware. Okay. Your inner voice, what you say is, I'm gonna be able to sell this. I believe in
Yeah.
this product. I'm good at what I can do. I can communicate. Now I gotta go and do it. So now what you ask and what you do. Explain what you ask and what you do.
Well, I think the what you ask is sort of, the kind of things that we do in sales, which is you have to find out whether what you are wanting this other person to do is in their best interest, and regardless of what's in your best interest. That goes back to having the right definition of selling. And so the other thing that the ask is about is how do you develop um, common ground, because common ground is sort of the foundation of many relationships. And so whenever, like I did a call yesterday with a client, so I didn't even know who we were talking to. I knew the company's name, but I didn't know the people. So I looked at who was invited. So hour and a half before the call, I looked at everybody. I looked everybody up on LinkedIn. I looked where they used to work. I wrote their names down. Next thing I did was I looked at all of the connections that we had in common. And there were 6 people on that call. I had connections with every single one of them. And so what I ordinarily do is I'll ask somebody, hey, do I say that you and so-and-so are connected. Is that a strong connection for you? And if it is, then immediately I've got common ground. Now, a lot of times people think common ground is something that's like, we both like the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, I like the Steelers because I'm a big Mike Tomlin fan. I mean, Tomlin, his first job after college when he graduated from William Mary was coaching football VMI, where I went, and I think he's a great coach. So if it's so as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, you got that, but it's basically, how do I learn what you treasure? See, if I find out what you treasure, and it's usually, in your case, it's probably your family. Obviously, it's your family. Obviously, it's your business. Obviously, it's those things that you're doing to, like with this potential university thing, where you can make a huge difference in people's lives. Then you and we can start having a completely different conversation. That doesn't mean that we can, at some point in time, take a left-hand turn and begin to talk about business if I begin to think that there may be some, opportunity there. So I'm not at all shy with my clients. And I mean, I met the CEO of this client that we're working with now that's had a huge success. But I said, look, everything that we've done for you is going to be a waste if you don't solve this problem. And I'm just telling you that because it's true. Now, you can do whatever you want to with it, but I'm telling you, if you don't do this, this is going to be a waste of money. And I had a conversation yesterday with the VP of sales, told him the same thing. And then he said, well, we don't really have anybody that's capable to go call on those people. I said, well, then let me go call on them, because I guarantee you I'm capable. I guarantee you I can do it. So I think you also get a degree of confidence when you can help people, and you're not kidding yourself, and you're not kidding them, and you're not doing it for your own selfishness. You're doing it because you want them to be successful, and you can play a role in that. You still there, Ben?
Are you back? Okay, we're
I'm back.
back. Okay. My question to you is, before we got cut off, is to really understand what you do and learn from you and be able to receive your benefits and your teachings. What's the best way to follow you, Jerry Acuff?
Well, I try and post once a week on LinkedIn, and I
Okay.
usually do something fairly
Hmm.
um, significant. I mean, in terms of conceptually, um, I think the books are probably pretty good. We also have a virtual training program. The relationship thing, I mean, if somebody wants that, we'll sell that to them for near next to nothing. It's virtual.
What's the company website so people can log
It's
on?
deltapoint.com.
Okay.
www.deltapoint.com.
So we're going to wrap up, but before we wrap up, Jerry, we ask our guests 3 questions. All right. And we'll rapid fire it so we can get you out of here and get on
Sure.
with your day. So you are in the I Own It studios. You're laying on our couch, and I ask you to close your eyes. And today Jerry Acuff is going to speak to his 16-year-old self. What advice would you tell yourself now that who you are and what you know, you could educate your 16-year-old self? What would you tell yourself?
You will be whatever you resolve to be. Most people never resolve to be anything, and I'm going to resolve to be great.
Okay. Okay. So it's your last, it's your last day on earth. It's your last meal on earth. You and I are sitting down to have a meal. What are we eating?
Probably an In-N-Out burger.
Oh, double animal style?
I don't
How
know.
do you like it? How do you do it? Lettuce
I
wrap? Are you an animal style? How do you take yours down?
I just eat I just eat it like I do. First place, I love. You don't have them, where we are, but
Uh-huh.
it's one of my favorite places to eat.
Oh, that's great. All right. And what are you washing that down with?
Probably unsweetened iced tea with some
Nice.
sweet and low.
Okay. So you're not going for the sweetened tea like you can get in Memphis.
No, I don't drink that.
Okay. And in our studios, you can see behind me, I have electric guitars, we have a drum set, and we have a grand piano to my left. If you were in studio with me, Jerry, and you can have any musician or band, they could be living or deceased, who is in studio with us playing us a song? Your choice.
Junior Walker and the All-Stars.
All right.
And I would have him sing "What Does It Take to Win Your Love for Me."
Fantastic.
And I love the saxophone. Or it would be George Strait. He stopped, Amarillo by Morning.
Nice. Well, Jerry, I wanted to thank you for coming on, your wealth of knowledge. We'll definitely have you back on because we didn't get to talk about everything, and it was so great to see you. If you are interested in following the Ben Reinberg I Own It podcast, drop kick that right hand button and click subscribe. If you want to follow me, go to benreinberg.com for more information on how we can help you with health, wealth, relationships, and business. If you want to learn commercial real estate, go to alliancecgc.com. Feel free to go on and peruse and look about who we are. And if you're interested in investing in the brand new Alliance Medical Property Fund, just direct message me, reach out to me, and we'll be happy to show you how we can benefit your life, just like it does mine. Thanks again, Jerry. We appreciate it. You own it and keep owning it. And thank you for coming on today.
Thanks, Ben.
Be well.